computer. All right. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to the first episode of the podcast series where we are actually bringing together engineering leaders from various fields to really pick their brain and their experiences on how a young aspiring engineer can succeed and have an exciting career. So, today on the podcast, we have Joshua. And, Joshua is a distinguished engineering leader, having completed his PhD at SUTD in quantum information. And he's currently the Chief Technology Officer at Staple, a company that focuses solutions to help accounting firms, healthcare companies, financial institutions, amongst many others, automate data entry, data capture, and document processing to free their clients' operations from time-consuming financial workflows using their technology. So, Joshua, being episode 1, really excited to have you on this podcast today.
Thanks, Kenny. Really happy to be there. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, all right. That's great lah. So episode 1, really excited to see what you have to share with us lah. So yeah, Joshua, perhaps maybe you want to introduce a little bit about yourself and your background to the audience.
Sure, that's good. So hi, Josh. I never used Dr. Josh. I was just thinking, like, you said I could do my PhD. No one, I forget that's a thing.
All right.
So originally I'm from the United Kingdom, from Staffordshire. I did my university course there, completed a master's in physics, moved to Singapore back in 2013, 2014, I think, so quite a long time ago now. Joined SUTD when it was a brand new university. I was one of the first batch of PhD students there. Completed my PhD in quantum information with applications in quantum protocols for secure computing. So I did things like multi-party computation, specifically things like homomorphic encryption, and things like one-time programs as well, which is some really exciting work on at the time. After completing my PhD in Singapore, I started my own company. I joined a thing called Entrepreneur First, which is an incubator. It helps people with ideas, or sometimes with almost no idea, try to grow a company. So I went in with one idea, changed quite dramatically, met my co-founder there, a guy called Ben Stein. Together we started Staple.AI, and now we're coming up to 4 years old, actually, and coming up to about 20 staff, I guess.
Wow, that's quite exciting. And having worked with startups before, I'm really glad that you actually did one for yourself, and it's going really well. But I'm just curious as to, because you said that you forgot everything about quantum information. So what made you, just curious, but what made you jump from where you were studying your PhD to where you are right now at Staple.AI, which is really a total.
Spoken like someone who's never done a PhD.
Yeah.
After you've spent so long in academia, I think some people's preferences sort of change a little bit. Because the academic track is a very different game to the real world. And it's got a lot of kind of in-group and a lot of politics. And it can be very rewarding if you're very passionate about the area. But I think at the end, honestly, I still liked physics. I liked stuff I was doing. I don't think I was enthralled with academia generally as what I wanted to do. And I don't think I had immediate hopes for quantum computing generally, which is what a lot of my work relied on. So I've been working in the AI field as well. I was like, okay, this may be, honestly, I have doubts if it's going to be coming in my lifetime, but AI stuff, I know I can apply this now. There's some great things I can do and a lot of opportunities to solve really interesting problems. So I'd like to go straight and do that. So I kind of made a little bit of a career switch and went off doing it that way. And a lot of people in physics especially end up moving physics to AI. In fact, one of the people who wrote the book in quantum information is also one of the big AI guys as well, actually.
Oh, that's interesting, seeing that transition over. So, because you mentioned that you and your co-founder actually founded Staple.AI. So, what motivated you to, move into the data processing kind of field, and what things you have seen that actually, really inspired you to start this company?
To start so initially how it happened is I joined Entrepreneur First, and I left my PhD. I'd got a little bit time on the visa in Singapore before I was like, what do I want to do? Maybe go back up, maybe go to the UK, maybe Australia, get a job, who knows. Just come out of academia. So I joined this program, which is initially a 3-month program where you get paid a small wage for those 3 months. And then if you come up with a good company idea in that time, they'll immediately give you a little bit of investment and take a chunk immediately. I realized that chunk for that amount of money was not a good deal, but I did start the company from it, so I can't really complain. Specifically, I wanted to start in encryption technologies, which was what my core background was. But as I got into it, the timeline for development looked quite long. And when you do a startup based around security, startup and security do not go very well together in the same sentence, especially when you're going to be selling something which is going to be an enterprise solution. So initially, I didn't see that working out so quickly. I sort of changed over to, I met a co-founder, Ben, and he was telling me about what accountants do, and I thought that was rubbish. They're reading numbers, they're doing math calculations, they're typing into computers. It's essentially computer work. It shouldn't be done by people. And we kind of noodled the problem around a little bit, and it all kind of came down to, well, it has to be done because you can't standardize data well. But I was like, okay, well, you can if you have flexible AI to read things and do that standardization for you, categorization, all sorts of stuff. So I was like, okay, if we just build this as a generic one to do standardization, then you can automate all these accountancy problems. So we built this generalized platform, and now it's being used for accountancy, but it's also being used for tax forms, healthcare forms, all sorts of things to automate data processing tasks. So honestly, I don't like data processing. I'm not interested at all, but that's why I try to automate it. I like that part, I guess.
Oh, that's interesting. I also have, a lot of forms and like things that I need to, do admins for. And it's always a hassle to actually manually type in, especially if it's in a big organization. It's like it's very time consuming lah. But yeah. But throughout your experiences with working with clients, right? Who are or which industries are the ones that require your solutions the most? Is there like a specific industry?
So the ones we focus on is like one of some of the core businesses we go after. So we're a B2B focus. We want people to have a really painful problem that they're really bringing pain to solve. Like one customer, the world's largest food delivery company. They own a very popular food delivery company in Singapore. It's Pink. I'm not going to tell you which one it is, but you probably know which one I mean. They do 100,000 invoices processing a month, and that's because they're moving products around. They're buying products and they're reselling products. That's an insane amount of documentation. So anyone in the FMCG space does a lot, fast-moving consumer goods. There's a lot of invoice processing. They have a lot of vendors and lots of different documentation. Banking is huge because they're just very paperwork heavy, and they also have a very expensive per person headcount. If you're working at a big bank, you're getting paid pretty well. But then if you're spending an hour a day reading in a client form saying what stocks they paid, bought, and what they didn't, and stuff, that's exactly what we're automating for one bank. Literally, it's reading their clients' stock portfolios and putting it in. They only maybe get, I don't know, maybe 500 a month. not that many documents by real standards, but when it's a banker doing it, the wage save that we're getting is immediately really good for them. The other ones are big accountancy companies and professional services. So think your big four accountants, we're involved with all of them. And they're doing tax forms, invoice auditing, paper shuffling stuff. And all of it can get automated if you can standardize the documents. You can standardize the data, you can automate the rest. The problem is that paperwork is not standardized. It's made for human readable, not machine readable. So if you can do that process, you automate things.
Yeah, wow, that sounds like a really, really useful solution, especially in the institutions where there are high wage workers that need to do more productive work. Yeah, but interestingly enough, I went and saw that your solutions are not the only OCR technology out there. But you mentioned that you have certain proprietary technology that gives you that competitive edge, right? So, could you just describe to the audience like what is different about Staple.AI as opposed to your other competitors out there?
Sure. Okay, so maybe just explain to some of the audience what OCR is. OCR is optical character recognition. Think you use an app on your phone to take a photo of a document and it turns into a PDF, and that you can copy the text. So what it's done is take an image and it's turned it into computer text, like a UFT8 encoding or whatever. That's great. That's a good first step. But if you took a photo of, say, a passport, that doesn't tell you what the person's name is. It doesn't tell you the expiry dates, or it doesn't tell you other things like, does the validation code at the bottom check out with the other details? In order to do that, you need to first get it all machine readable text, but then you need to identify what each bit of text refers to and get it into a standardized output such that a computer can turn any image of a passport or document into something that it expects to receive and deal with it. That last process is quite hard because documents come in every shape and size. So it's very difficult to standardize them. That's what our AI does. So even before we do the computerizing, the OCR part, sometimes the photo of the passport is like in a selfie and someone like taking a really bad photo. So we do computer vision to get a slightly better read on that photo, crop it out, rotations, all that kind of things. Then you're running the OCR, which is quite standard. After that, you've got to make sense of that text, combine it with positional data about where it is on the page, because context is important. Not everything is written by a book, so sometimes bits of text can be very far apart but linked. Think tables or bullet points and all sorts of things. It can be very difficult to interpret. And then you need to put down to a standard form. So that's what our AI is doing, which is a really complex task. There are some other competitors who do that for certain specific document types, not as well as us, I would say. But Staple does it in over 100 languages, and we do it for any document type, which is why it's a slightly more generalized and powerful solution.
Wow, seems like wow. So it means that your system is really compatible across different types of documents and provide that flexibility for many different industries. Am I right to say that?
Yeah, the reason for that is originally everyone focused on invoicing because everyone deals with so many invoices if you've got those vendors. But invoicing won't be like this forever. A lot of countries are moving towards e-invoicing and putting QR codes in invoicing. And this might seem like, okay, you can go into harder and harder ones, like we stay away from Europe and America and Vietnam starting to automate them. You maybe focus on India and Myanmar stuff, but although India is doing e-invoicing now. Eventually, you find yourself going to harder and harder problems with a smaller market, and that's not where you want to go. Instead, generalize the AI to get all document processing out, which is what our goal was.
Yep. So actually, just a follow-up question, just out of curiosity as well, because we are moving into a more digitalized industry where actually a lot of these invoices or even records actually typed into the database directly itself lah, inside the system. So because or at least your solutions is actually meant to process like maybe mostly hard copy data. Am I right to say that?
It can be a hard copy, it can be a digital copy as well, like a PDF or yeah, sorry, carry on.
Oh, okay. Oh, right.
But
So
if you're right, a lot of systems are trying to automate end to end. Like if you weren't dealing with photo, if I was dealing with pure data at the start, like instead of generating a paper invoice, I generate an e-invoice, which is like a nice a JSON or an XML file or something like this, which is easily machine readable on the other side. You don't need my solution. The problem is that you have to get different parties to agree on standards. And that's the hard thing. With invoicing, there's a different thing. There's a big thing called the government, who's got a big interest in standardizing this because it means they can tax everybody. But for other things, it's not so easy to get people to work together and agree on standards, especially for something like documents, because you can't just have a computer standard for document. You have to have one something people can read and deal with as well, and that standard has to link to that document as well. So our thought was that maybe that happens with invoicing, and it's going to happen around the world, slowly but surely, because the government wants their tax. But for things like broker statements, they don't care. But we want to automate it for things like birth certificates, hospital forms, I don't know, utility bills, whatever. That's what we do. For example, but if anyone's listening and they do want invoice automation solution, we do offer this as well. Just saying, come see me. But that was our thought process going in.
okay, wow, that's really interesting. So, speaking of which, I believe Staple.AI has came a very long way from where it was previously 4 years ago. And, what are some of the exciting developments that you have, for the next 5 to 10 years moving ahead? What's your grand vision for Staple.AI?
Oh, I can't tell you everything because then we'd be releasing all the upcoming features, and that's all I know. There can be a competitor listening to this.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, correct. All right.
I can tell you the grand vision is to really automate the majority of document processing tasks. No one enjoys reading a document, reading another document, comparing data, typing it. No one enjoys that kind of stuff, especially in a business. They want to do decision-making processes, which they think will make an impact, or they want human-to-human interaction, which is what people are good at for making a sale, supporting customer. The goal is really to get Staple to be ubiquitous as the solution for this. We're working a lot with big partners like SAP and IBM to try and push that forward. At the moment, we're also focusing on big enterprises, so one by one getting those knocked out, and then as the solution is a little more friendly, and we've got also a little more friendly and a little more ready to roll for the small customers. Small customers, you can't spend time customizing things or doing things. They just want it out the box, $50 a month, done. At the first moment, one phone call and that's already taken a profit out of that customer. So first, getting it ubiquitous across the enterprise customers, and then kind of moving down to smaller and smaller customers as well. So at the moment, we're a lot of Fortune 500s, big customers. Then going to medium enterprises. Think your local restaurants with like 5 outlets in the country. They're pretty big. They have a very much need to automate various things. And then going down eventually to you and me when you want to automate. I think that one's the hardest one. It's also the one with the least money. So that comes last.
All right. Interesting. Thanks so much for sharing about the company and the vision. Right. So, let's I believe the audience will also love to, understand where your journey began, right? And just more of you as a person. So, how did you first got into, software development or coding, and what sparked the initial interest?
Um, so for software development, I got into it through physics. So as a physics student, we had to learn C programming. I might have done something odd at high school. I can't remember if I did any other things like Go to Basic or something, which is older. But the first language was C, which we had to do for some courses. I remember writing Monte Carlo simulations and Ising models for finding the Curie point in magnetism or something like that. But you heat up a magnet, it stops being magnetic, that stuff. You can model it. I had to write that in C. And I quite enjoyed that. And then later, instead of doing an intern in kind of business or finance, because a lot of physics people end up going into banking, I did an internship in my university with graphics cards programming, and that was really new then. Well, the graphics cards have been around for a while, but programming for scientific research was quite new because you could model things like fluids really well, and this was kind of a cool new thing to do with graphics cards at the time. So I did that. I really enjoyed it for like a whole summer just programming, which I really enjoyed. And that must have been on about like 1920 or something in my undergrad. And then after that, I kind of didn't. I went into more cryptography for the degree. Didn't do as much programming, but I find myself doing well. I did. I did a lot more in Python and MATLAB to do mathematical simulations, and I kind of enjoy doing that more than whiteboarding the solutions, probably to my disadvantage. So then that's how I kind of got into it. I just kind of liked it a little bit. Yes.
Yeah, but I'm just curious as well. Aside from more academic kind of work that you've done, is there any cool projects you remember doing when you were still studying?
Um, yeah, I did a couple. I did a few hackathons in Singapore. Um, one of them we did a thing for Twitter for disinformation, which was really cool. So what you could do is, oh, sorry, I'm just gonna nerd out and tell you about hackathon projects if you want. Um, you can look at a story on Twitter and look at how many people it shared to and kind of make a graph, like nodes and edges. Um, you can also find opposing stories. So you find one's Fox News and one's New York Times, and they might have the same story with opposite spins, and you find the opposite graph. One way to kind of inoculate people against fake news is you find the fake news and then you find the counterclaim. And then if you look at if that fake news exists in some kind of graph of people who share this kind of crap, you can find the counterclaim from another graph and cross-share it to kind of inoculate them. So if you get the counterclaim to them first before they see something fake, usually the first thing sticks. So we did some cool stuff on that. That was a nice one-day hackathon. I wrote a trading bot, which kind of that was all in Python. That was for doing an evolutionary algorithm that like picked stocks and like had lots of different traders who would have their own stock portfolios and would kind of like evolve them as though they were things. Like traders would have their stocks, you'd breed the traders, they'd change their stocks as though they were genes, and then they'd have different portfolios for kids and then kill them off if they wouldn't. Turns out it didn't work very well because I trained it over a data set and just said buy gold and housing. And then like 2008 came and yeah. Turns out, yeah, you can't really model the markets any way you try.
Wow. Sounds like really, really ambitious projects you got there. Yeah. But how often do you actually practice or hone your craft in the
Nowadays, not at all. So frankly, I was programming when I first started Staple, but I am good at the ideas and I'm quite good in certain areas, but I'm not as talented a software developer in other areas. Like I don't do front end very well. So our front end is React.js. I don't know JavaScript. It's not a language that I'm familiar with. Then I've made certain design decisions about what kind of technologies. Like I chose GraphQL for our backend, which was quite new at the time, which is really, really powerful if you're dealing with lots of different possible API requests, and you might have a low network latency. Look at GraphQL for those reading. It's a really great technology for. But I don't code so much nowadays. Most of my work is talking to clients to understand their issues more, working out how difficult that would be because I know our tech stack and know how it works, and then unfortunately opening a ticket for another engineer to do it with a reasonable expectation of how difficult it will be. So yeah, I'm one of those unfortunate bosses who actually know how difficult the engineer's work is. So you can keep them working at max capacity, which is unfortunate for them. But I'm not as good a software engineer as actually most of the people in the company now. We've got some really great people done it much better than me.
Right. Wow. So it's really a different role that you are taking, as a CTO, as opposed to what most people, young engineers would think also. Right. But speaking of which, Joshua, I've seen that you actually mentored many young associates over at Staple, whether through an internship or a full-time job. And many of them whom you had very, very positive experience working with. So I'm just curious as to, what are some of the traits that some of these young guns actually displayed that shows a lot of strong potential for their growth in the engineering space?
Being able to Google is pretty solid. Quite frankly, if you've got people who are good at code, have the attitude of there's a solution somewhere, I just need to find it. Like, so your code doesn't work, you can't figure out why it won't work or how to do the certain thing. The solution exists, and you have to have the mentality that the solution is there. You just need to keep going until you find it. Having that attitude is the biggest thing, because that will keep you going, not just like slapping laptop shut and watching Netflix. Tempting. Doing that and really having a go at solving problems yourself before reaching out. Like, not the first stumbling block you get to quickly jumping over for help. Having the attitude of doing that problem solving, because that's what a lot of people are doing a lot of the time, is with solving their own problems. It's not every time. Sometimes, if you're setting something up, and by all means, you can ask an engineer to just help you do the setups, because we can just help you get that very quickly. But other things, kind of doing it yourself. Getting strong on the basics is another one. A lot of people, a lot of engineers I interview want to jump straight into AI and data science, and what they've been doing is Python and Jupyter Notebook. And they go, great, I want to work in a team. It's like, okay, what's Git? What's the difference between a push and commit? How do you make a pull request? If you can't answer these questions, you can't work in a team with the rest of us, because how can you link your code to ours? Or like, can they use an API? Do they know what a RESTful API is? If they can't say how to use one, or the differences maybe between a few of the basics like put, push, put, post, get, delete or something. If they don't know those differences, then that's a really bad thing, because it's going to mean that they're really limited in what they can do. They might just be writing one script things. So those are some of the basics we usually ask to kind of get people going.
Oh, that's you answered my next question, already. But So, what's your mentorship style like as an engineer leader? Because I know that you actually, as an engineering leader or maybe as a CTO, you have to take on a very different role. But how do you actually groom these young associates to,
Grooming is the wrong word.
oh,
Um,
maybe mentored? What would be
um,
that?
uh, so, um, geez, don't be a don't be a dick to the interns. Is a pretty good piece of advice. Like, get them working on an interesting project. Like, number one, they're an intern. They should be learning something. If they're not learning something, you're a kind of crappy boss because you're probably not paying them an incredibly large amount unless you're Facebook or something. And if they're at Facebook, they probably don't care if they're learning anything. So they've got Facebook on their resume. A startup, you need to prove your value a little bit to the interns, or else you don't get any more. Um, these, if someone if the interns I took in the first few years, if they went to other companies, but they did, they went to some great companies afterwards. A lot of them went to Shopee and ByteDance. But they took a risk with Staple because we weren't a well-known company. So we had to give them interesting work and good support on technologies. So that's a big thing. Making sure you've got some clear deliverables of here's what I want you to learn. Like by the end of this internship, you're going to help us make a server. But in this internship, you need to know you will know how to learn Flask, you'll know Docker, and you'll know Kubernetes. That's a great 3 things to have learned in an internship because you write those at the top of your CV. If you can talk about those in an interview, the next company is going to love you because those are great sets of skills. So having some clear goals, doing that, holding them a bit to account. Like you do get certain people who are a little bit lazy sometimes. Some interns come in thinking they're gonna be having a bit of an easy ride and not have to do anything. Like they'll just turn up and like grab a coffee, watch the news. Being sure, like, no, these are tasks, we need to do this, or else you're not going to be an intern any longer. Yes, we even get rid of interns. But usually they pick it up, they start working, and they're better for it at the end of it because they really learn stuff.
Oh, so wow, that sounds intense. But what are some of the what is it? Maybe besides like outside of Staple.AI, what are some of the common problems or at least mistakes that actually many young engineers make, aside from the things you have actually mentioned previously?
Yeah. General advice for people at engineers: never tell anyone something is easy. Even if you think it is easy, say that is we understand the roles. You try not to use the word easy because you'll set bad expectations. There's people expect to go, oh cool, 5 minutes done. Difficulty is not the same thing as time. Other things. What I've seen from a lot more senior people, especially my clients' engineers who are senior, really good at handling scope creep or knowing how to push back a little bit on expectations from people who aren't technical and not always understanding what they're asking for. Um, if you're working in if you're working in a team nowadays, you're probably doing something like agile. So you'll have a scrum master who kind of will be organizing tickets. You'll be working with a team, and you won't have to answer to someone non-technical usually. But just be careful not to let someone non-technical try and control things too much. Because eventually you'll realize that you actually do know better, and you should be telling them, no, actually, we should do things this way. That comes with confidence later. You can't do that in the first couple of years. You kind of take a little bit of crap. But hopefully there's a senior there to make sure that doesn't happen. Because you'll make work for you, and that's really pleasant. You can easily get snowed under with a lot of just stupid requests. If a request comes in, being really clear and saying, cool, what is the business urgency of this request? Because it makes them understand that there's a hierarchy of things you're working on. And if they're just telling that person who's making the request for something technical, if I'm doing this, by the way, this is going to affect this other piece of work like this. So communicating, essentially. A lot of engineers don't, especially when they're junior, don't communicate. They get given a task, the task is on the plate, and they go, yes, sir, thank you, sir. And then the manager comes back a week later, the engineer's fried and they've written buggy code and it's not finished. And the manager's angry because it's not done. And the engineer's like hasn't slept for 2 days and they're wrecked. So no one's happy. If you got to communicate a little bit on the pushback. And unfortunately, that's your responsibility because the manager doesn't know any better if they're not technical. That's a probably a good one, I guess.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for that really insightful sharing. And yeah, in your opinion, aside from learning all the, very popular or very crucial languages, what would you suggest like aspiring engineers, even coming into your company to develop or hone their skills, what's the best way to do so?
To hone their skills, there's lots of things you can do to. I'm not sure. Having a good hobby project is nice. Like working in a small team to a hobby project is a great thing, because then you'll learn a little bit of Git, which is crucial. If you can get that project live online and for someone else to use, that's really great, because that would demonstrate to me that you've mastered a few different skills. You've been able to deploy something, which means you've maybe do it with DigitalOcean or AWS or something a little bit. You've got a little bit of understanding about how that's working. You've got used Cloudflare for DNS, getting that up. You've maybe got a little bit of understanding for APIs if that's doing some task, and you can write code that doesn't just 500 server error and crash immediately. That's pretty good. I'm trying to think of things which aren't too specific to my company. Like I always ask very similar questions. Like if they don't know what an API is, that's kind of difficult because that means it can't work. Don't know what Git is. Then I ask some basics. Usually I ask some Python basics. Tuples versus lists versus sets. What's the difference? Kind of basic stuff like that. How does copy and deep copy work with lists in Python? If I assign A to a list and then B to A, how is the list memory assigned? This kind of, if you work with Python for a little bit longer, these kind of things catch you out, so you can kind of catch new people out this way. But generally, if it's not language or tech dependent, saying just have some nice hobby projects and work with some friends who are also nerdy and do something cool. And that's really good to talk about, because if you can sound passionate in interview about projects, that's always good.
Okay, wow, so that's really insightful. And I just want to ask also, because as a CTO, right, you also, and I saw some of your, interns also mentioned that you also help them develop in their soft skills aspect. So, because we've always been talking a lot about the technical skills, right? But what are some of the soft skills that you had to develop moving into a CTO role? And taking up a more less technical but more overseer kind of role?
Quite a lot. Getting more professional with how you talk to clients. Like unfortunately it seeps back into your normal life as well. You spend so long kind of like being professional and talking to clients and that kind of thing that it's hard to let it go after work. Just not doing anything dumb in client meetings. It's easy to say something stupid. Just knowing when to keep your mouth shut is a bit of a skill. I'm trying to think of other just general skills. Being a lot more neat comes with it, and how we organize a lot of work. Like Nowadays, everything is driven by calendar, documentation goes straight into Notion. We archive things, tasks so on Agile board. When I first started the company, it was a little bit harebrained. It was me writing code. I was telling someone else, "Oh, you should do this now." There wasn't a ticketing system for work. It wasn't agile. There was no documentation. Maybe just a little bit in the code, but quite frankly, who's reading that? These kind of processes. These aren't soft skills though. With the engineers, I probably got a bit harder with them as I've got on. Like I started out as an engineer myself, so being really friendly, like, oh, 4 o'clock Friday, let's go home. Get a beer. You start to have to be a little harder, which is not so nice, I guess. But unfortunately, this is what happens when you have a company. Stuff has to get done. You've got clients waiting on you. You told them it'll be done by Monday. It's got to be done by Monday. The engineer said it'll be done by Friday. It's got to be done by Friday. They agreed to it. We had the communication. That's a bit sucky, but sorry, not a nice one there. I got meaner and I got more boring.
Oh man, interesting. Yeah, so it's as a close, right? Do you have any last words or advice you want to really give to your audience or potential people wanting to intern or work at Staple.AI? No.
Oh, apply. Frankly, if you apply, I try to apply to everyone who gives in their CV. Yeah, just send it in. If you're a good engineer, with a passion for doing interesting work, we're always interested. Now I feel bad. Now I think after saying all this stuff previously, I don't know if anyone wants to apply now. They've just heard what I said. But we're not hard on interns. Like we know that you're not going to know much. So our goal is really to get like a little bit of work out of you, but mostly you're going to learn things yourself. We wouldn't have you working on more than one server. Like here's one server, see if you can set it up. That's this week. Like learn Docker, learn Flask, but in the week, can you tell me what Docker is? Cool. Um, yeah, just apply, have fun. Advice for people generally, if you're in the second or third year, do an internship. One of the things I did an internship, but I did in academia. If I'd have done one in software engineering, I have no idea where I'd have gone instead. I might not have done a PhD, I might have gone straight into software engineering. You learn a lot. Make sure you're doing an internship where you're not getting coffee. Just be clear right at the start, like what you're going to work on. Are you going to code? If they're not asking you coding questions in the application process, you're not going to be doing coding work, because if they don't ask you that kind of stuff, they're not going to get you to use it. So yeah, do an internship. Yeah, and don't worry if it's not a big company. You might actually win more interesting stuff at a small company because they've got more jobs kind of going for work to be done, and they're willing to let an intern do it.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So, anyways, audience, the interns that actually work for him actually have a very pleasant experience. So, do not do not be. I think it's yeah, he's a really really nice guy. So yeah, don't be alarmed. Yeah. So Joshua, last question to you. How can the audience actually best reach you, over LinkedIn or?
Yeah, get me on LinkedIn. My email is josh@staple.io. You can reach out to me there. And now I do feel bad. I've never had a bad review. But we've always had great interns, so
Oh, that's great.
But yeah, do apply. And if you're not interested in Staple, do let me know. If you're interested in something else, all Singapore's a very small place. So if you're like, Josh, I want to work in, drone technologies. I know a few people who are in companies in that area now. Reach out. and happy to link you up. It's always good to be connected with people in tech because what goes around comes around. So happy to help.
All right, awesome, man. So really hoping for the audience to that you are inspired by Josh's sharing, and if any one of you really interested and really resonates with him, feel free to apply. His inbox is always open. All right. So yeah. So anyways, thanks Josh so much for the being on the first guest on this series of podcasts, and hope everyone actually learn a thing or two, and if do reach out to him if you're actually looking for opportunities in this space. So thanks Josh, and that really concludes our first podcast, and see you in the next one. All right, okay, bye.